One of my favorite people in the whole world is Harmony Dust Grillo. Girl, I love you, and I want the whole world to know that. Harmony is someone with 20 years of experience as an activator, an activist in this fight. And she's done the hard work. She's done the homework. She's a UCLA grad. She has a master's in social work. She is doing the work, and she has an amazing message for us right now. How many of you have already bought her second edition book of Scars and Stilettos? It's outside, please. There will be a long line. She is armed with personal experience, a master's degree in social work, and evidence-based theories that makes my heart sing as a professor. She sheds light on the impact of a pornified culture and the lives of women trapped in it. She's received congressional recognition. She's trained Los Angeles Police Department, Las Vegas Police Department, Department of Justice, and the FBI. Dave, you might have sat in one of her classes. She has moved from victim to survivor to liberator. She's a mom, a wife, and a woman of God.
Thank you. I love you so much. Good morning. Okay, well, first of all, I want to thank and honor Brian and Kelly Bell for all the years that you've been doing this. I so appreciate you giving your time. I know it's not convenient. I have the opportunity to train all over the world, and I tell people about what you guys are doing here because I believe in it, and I think it's absolutely wonderful. I'm honored to be a part of it. I was here year one. I've been here, a part of it, every year except for the year that I had my son Luca, who was born on National Human Trafficking Awareness Day. I think I did my part that year. So, alrighty. So there is a growing movement in the United States to fully decriminalize prostitution. A lot of states are including it in their legislative agenda, and it is very likely going to be coming up in the state of California as well. So it's really important, and I'm so thankful for the platform, for us to really understand what that would mean and to just unpack decriminalization and take a look at that. So this is personal to me. As Sandy mentioned, I am a survivor of exploitation. I am the daughter of a victim of trafficking. So for me, this has been generational. And I have spent 20 years working with victims of trafficking and exploitation and women in the sex industry. The first 3 years through social service agencies, and then 17 years ago, I founded Treasures. And our mission is to provide services to help women live healthy and flourishing lives and to provide them pathways to freedom from the commercial sex industry, exploitation, and trafficking. I do not have time at all. Many of you might have heard my story from the years that I've been here, but I do not have time to talk about it today. If you're interested, my memoir, Scars and Stilettos, is actually on sale for $10 for National Human Trafficking Awareness Month because we want to make it accessible, available, affordable to you. It almost sold out in the first service. So if you're interested, our table's out there, go grab a copy. And so here's the big question. Should prostitution be fully decriminalized? Support for this is being fueled by the World Health Organization, a number of different organizations, but a big part of the movement to fully decriminalize is being initiated by sex workers' rights groups, right? I also have to say they are well prepared, well funded, and they've been planning for this for a long time. We are behind the curve and we are catching up. But the problem is that the sex workers' rights groups who are for full decriminalization do not represent the majority of women in prostitution. They do not represent the majority, the 89% of women in prostitution who say they want to leave but see no other means for survival, right? In general, the marginalized, the oppressed, the vulnerable, the exploited, the trafficked do not tend to speak up as often or as loudly, and their voices are not being heard in this discussion, and they need to be. I also recognize that there are many people who have gotten into prostitution out of mere survival. I have known women personally who have started selling their bodies to pay for chemotherapy because they didn't have insurance, or to buy much-needed medication for their children. And so I'm not judging that, but my dream and my desire is to see systemic change to the point that prostitution, selling one's body, is not the only avenue of survival, that there are other options. So, one of the big kind of arguments for full decriminalization is that prostitution is just a job, right? It's just a job like any other, and who are we to say that consenting adults can't choose to engage in prostitution, as a means to livelihood, right? Mortality rates alone dispel the myth that prostitution is just a job. The death rate of women in prostitution is 240 times any other profession. It's not just a job. On top of that, violence is the norm. 83%, I'm sorry, I have to keep a cough drop because I'm getting over the flu, blah, blah, blah. Don't get it. It's awful. I thought it almost took me out. So here we are. 83% of women in prostitution report having been threatened with a weapon. 82% report having been physically assaulted, beaten, slashed with razor blades, burned, choked. I mean, right? This is prevalent in prostitution. 80% report being raped. In fact, it is said that women in prostitution are the most raped class of women in the history of our planet, with 80% having been raped at least once, and 73% having been raped at least 5 times. If we saw this level of sexual assault and violence in any other workplace, that kind of sexual harassment would be subject to legal action. For women in prostitution, it is a job requirement, right? And the big thing is, legalization and decriminalization have been shown to do nothing to protect people in prostitution from this level of violence. And I can tell you my personal experience. I worked in the commercial sex industry in strip clubs under the control of a pimp. And so this is an area of the commercial sex industry that is legal, right? I was sexually assaulted on many occasions, and I actually began to finally fight back. And I grew in the habit of taking off my stiletto and beating my assaulter in the head with my stiletto. And on a number of those occasions, the police were called to the strip club, and when I stood there and explained to them that I did that in self-defense because I had been sexually assaulted, the police officers looked at me like I was crazy because I was standing half naked in the middle of a strip club. And they looked at me like, why are you complaining? This is your job, right? Sexual harassment, sexual assault is your job. And in fact, they told me that I had to apologize to the person who had just assaulted me, and if I didn't, I would be facing mutual battery charges, right? And so that is an example of the kind of violence that even happens in legal areas of the commercial sex industry. Another indication that prostitution is not just a job is the rates of PTSD that we see among those in prostitution. They have rates of PTSD that are equivalent to combat war veterans, right? We wouldn't see that level of trauma response, post-traumatic stress disorder, if prostitution was just a job. Here's what one survivor explained. There are thousands of books and classes that provide women with information on self-defense and rape avoidance strategies. Some of the basic lessons they teach us, and you know this, not to walk alone at night in dark, deserted streets, not to get into cars with strange men, not to pick up any guys in a bar, and not to even let a delivery man into your home when you're by yourself. Yet, this is what the job of prostitution requires, that women put themselves in jeopardy every time they turn a trick. And then we ask, how do you prevent it from leading to danger? The answer is, you can't. Count the bodies. Prostitution is not just a job, it's an unfathomably profitable system of violence that exploits the most vulnerable in our society. The other thing is prostitution and trafficking are inextricably connected. 70% of female victims of trafficking are trafficked into the commercial sex industry, including prostitution and other legal forms of it. And this is, I think, if you remember NoStat, remember this one, and this is based on 18 different sources, including research, government reports. It's estimated that 84% of women in prostitution are under third-party control, being pimped or trafficked. 84%. This is not a population of consenting adults who, having a plethora of career options, decide that selling their body for sex is their career of choice. 84% are under third-party control. And when you look at the entire body of research as it relates to women in prostitution, you find overwhelmingly that women in prostitution are disproportionately impoverished, ethnic minorities, those that are undereducated, and those that have few marketable job skills. That's why it's been described by some as the choice made by those who have no choice. And I ask you, what is choice without options? What is choice without options? Are you guys still with me? Are you drinking from a fire hose today? Did you have your coffee? All right. And the final point here, and this is super important, is that decriminalization does not lead to a decrease in trafficking. In fact, the opposite is true. Decriminalization, full decriminalization, has been shown time and time again to lead to an increase in trafficking. We know this because when you look at 100, and there's been studies that have looked at 150 countries, and on average, those places where prostitution is legal or fully decriminalized have much higher inflows of human trafficking. Nevada is an incredible example of this. When prostitution was legalized in some places in Nevada, we saw a huge explosion in the illegal sex trade. In fact, Nevada has the largest illegal sex trade in our nation adjusted for population because prostitution was legalized there. Why is that? Because we know this. Normalization leads to an explosion in demand because people who wouldn't normally buy sex when it's illegal begin to buy sex when it's legal. And demand does exactly what it promises. It demands supply by any means necessary. And this is where pimps and traffickers come in. They see the demand, and by any means necessary, they make sure that they can meet it. There are not enough people who are willing to sell their bodies for sex, and so pimps and traffickers use kidnapping, brute force, violence, drugging, rape, torture, psychological coercion, manipulation, trickery, all so that they can create the supply necessary to meet that increased demand. So what do? I want to quickly go over 4 models for addressing prostitution, 4 legal models. The first one is criminalization. That's what we currently have happening. Buying sex, selling sex, pimping, pandering, all of it is illegal in our current model. If we choose to keep this model, I can tell you this. We need to do a better job of identifying victims and bringing justice to buyers and to traffickers. As Dave mentioned, you are more likely to get struck by lightning than prosecuted for trafficking. That is crazy. And we see based on research that overwhelmingly the people being arrested in this model today are those that are being prostituted. Those are the ones getting arrested, and by and large, buyers, traffickers are being set free. We also need to do a better job at offering alternative sentencing, right? Programs, rehabilitation, opportunities for those who are trapped in prostitution to find pathways to permanent freedom. The second model is legalization. This is what we talked about. This is where prostitution is legal and therefore regulated. Places like the red light district in Amsterdam, Nevada, where there are legal brothels in some places, right? And so one of the things that strikes me about this is in this situation, the government is profiting off of the exploitation of people. That does not sit well with me. And again, we already have talked about the incredible rise in trafficking that we see in places where it's legalized. The model that is being proposed today in most places in the United States is full decriminalization, which would mean buying sex, selling sex, pimping, pandering would all be fully decriminalized and fully unregulated. Pimping would not be illegal. And if you're a part of this movement, you know this, and if you don't, I'm here to tell you that pimping is a form of trafficking, because the tactics that pimps use to recruit their victims are force, fraud, and coercion, right? And so although trafficking would remain illegal in the full decrim model, it's very difficult to identify often who is a victim of trafficking because of the psychological coercion that takes place, because of the brainwashing, because of the fact that most victims do not self-identify, and many who are in that level of coercion will even stand up for their exploiters because of the trauma bonds that exist. And it's because of all of this that some people have come to call the full decrim model the pro-pimping law. Because ultimately, that's what would be happening, is that pimps would be protected and traffickers would be protected. The final and fourth model that we talk about is the abolition model. You may know it as the Nordic model. And in this model, the selling of sex would not be illegal. The selling of sex would not be illegal. And that might be a little bit of a like, wait, what, right? And basically it's because of this understanding that a person should not be penalized. A person should not be penalized for their own exploitation, right? In this model, buying sex, pimping, pandering, all of that would remain illegal. Programs that support victims and provide pathways to freedom would be established and supported. But this model believes that a person should not be penalized for their own exploitation. This is essentially what we're starting to do across the nation with minors who have been in prostitution. Because we know this, there is no such thing as a child prostitute, right? Anyone under the age of 18 who engages in a commercial sex act is, by federal definition, considered a victim of trafficking. It was in our very recent past that children all over across the nation were being arrested for prostitution. There is no such thing as a child prostitute. That is a victim of trafficking. We're finally catching up and changing laws, and in many, many states, I believe it's over 30, the laws have been changed, so we are, in most states, not arresting children for prostitution anymore. Essentially, the abolition model would take that paradigm and extend it to adults, recognizing the inherent exploitation, the vulnerability, the connection to trafficking that's happening within the system of prostitution, and provide a pathway out for those who are experiencing that. Here's the great news. There is hope, because God is a God of justice. I am standing here today because God is a God of justice. He is a healer. He is a redeemer, right? He's no respecter of persons. Thank you. What he did in my life, he wants to do in the lives of every single person on the face of this planet who is oppressed and experiencing injustice. And how does he do that? Through you and I, as conduits of justice. I'm standing here today because a 22-year-old college student, she wasn't an expert in exploitation, a 22-year-old college student reached out to me, showed me God's love, loved me unconditionally. That's why I'm here today. That was the catalyst for change in my life. You can use what's in your hand, yes, and you can encourage and impact the people in your sphere of influence, and you can use what is in your hand to do something, to get involved and get engaged. I'm going to give you 4 quick things that you can do. First, I realized that I have just unpacked A big thing, really fast, put out a lot of data. I want you to be equipped to have conversations about this and to understand all this. So I have summarized my talk in a postcard. It's available at our resource table. I would love to be able to get that into your hands. You can go over it. You can have a quick kind of reference guide. My PowerPoint is available to you if you're interested. If you just sign up for our newsletter, we'll go ahead and send you my PowerPoint if that's of interest to you. Number 2, you can choose an organization to partner with. It doesn't have to be Treasures. If it is, awesome. There are 18 organizations represented outside. Find that one that resonates with you, that you want to use your time, talent, and treasures to get involved with. The third thing, pick a book or read a blog and get more educated. If it's Scars and Stilettos, awesome. If it's not, pick a book. If you can't afford a book, go to IamATreasure.com. We have a blog. It's free, right? Continue to equip yourself. Get educated. And finally, the final thing is use your voice. Have conversations about the service today. Talk to the people in your sphere of influence. Use your voting power. Your voice matters. We need you. If we are ever going to see an end to this injustice, it's going to take all of us coming together and doing our part. Thank you so much.
That is a lot to digest, huh? But so good.